Have you ever thought, I have to stay in this job because otherwise I'll lose my health insurance? I know it's something that I thought about when I was making the leap into entrepreneurship. So you definitely want to listen to this episode because there's going to be a whole lot of awesome information into it. Welcome to another episode of The Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business. I'm your host, Catryn Becker. And on this podcast, we talk to incredible, successful people because we want to learn what they have learned in their career that has made them so successful. Because behind all of that success is a mountain of failures and learnings and wrong turns and dead ends and all of the things that we experience as being part of life, as being human. So we want to hear what they have learned so we can either avoid those same mistakes or we can fail through them faster. My guest today has been a friend for a long time, and we just realized we've never actually met in person, which is crazy in this Zoom world. But he is the CEO of Reclaim Your Premium Health Insurance, and he's coming to us with bananas behind him. He's going to bring the energy. Nick Davis, welcome to the show.
Oh, right on. What's up, Catryn? What's up, everybody? How you guys doing? You guys are awesome, man. Thank you so much for having me.
So I just have to, for the audio listeners, Nick has a screensaver behind him with bananas, and there's a little banana with googly eyes that runs behind him as well. So if you want to see this in person, either schedule a meeting with Nick or head over to the YouTube channel so that you can see it for yourself. But Nick, I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Absolutely. It's so fantastic to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Absolutely. And can you believe we've never met in person?
Dude, that is honestly, that's super bananas. Like, I was just thinking about it. I was like, man, how does this even like a thing? Like, because it's like we've known each other for a hot minute. And I'm like, I had to have been. And you're like, no, we didn't. I'm like, oh, beans. I suppose you're right. Huh. That's crazy.
That's a beautiful thing, and what a small world we live in that we can be connecting in these great ways and not actually have to be physical. Which
Most
is
definitely.
something that you're really good at connecting people. So before we talk about some of the health insurance and how you got into that, I really want to talk a little bit about networking because that's how you and I met. We met
Absolutely.
through BNI networking, but you have not stopped there as far as networking.
No, not in the slightest. Not in the slightest at all. Yeah, while I was in BNI, I also, so basically like when the world shut down, it's kind of when my business started. And that's kind of when it was so weird, like networking wise, right? So here I am, like this fledgling situation, right, in 2020, right? And I'm like, it's kind of like you have all the information in the world, but it's like Ricky Bobby, like, what do I do with my hands? I don't know what to do, right? And then I'm like, ah. And so I was like, oh, I'll go to an in-person networking event. So we went to an in-person networking event, and it was the weirdest, most odd thing ever. It just felt like everybody was like forced to talk. And I'm like, is this what networking is like? This is what people think is awesome? Like, how is this a thing, Then, of course, they make it to me and they're like, who is this Yahoo? Who let this guy in? You know what I mean? Because I'm like, not as like, as like the average individual.
You're basically Guy Fieri of health insurance.
There we go. That one works.
Has anyone ever said that to you before?
Several times. Yeah.
I mean, you should own it.
Oh, for sure. 100%, dude. 100%. Yeah, it's fun. Like, so I went to the in-person thing and I was like, this is just super weird, right? So then I came back to my computer and I was like, and one of the people, like I was doing a one-to-one with this dude and he was like, hey, you want to meet on Zoom? And I was like, what the crap's Zoom? And he's like, oh, it's this really cool like thing. And I'm like, oh, this is the future. It's like what I saw on Demolition Man, for example, And I'm like, huh, okay, cool. So I got my Zoom account and everything like that. And then it was just some crazy stuff because I was like, huh, this is interesting. It opened up a whole new world of stuff. And then started networking with this group of individuals who like they were in California for a while. There's somewhere in California and Oklahoma, Texas, stuff like that. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Started meeting some more people and stuff like that. And then it's really just like networking for me has been, if I could just title it with something, like at some point in time, I will write a book and it will be called On the Wings of the Universe, because that's literally how I always carried in the networking world, because it's insane. Like I started out as this like weird, at this weird, awkward in-person thing and went to a virtual event that was cool for a while and then got weird and awkward. And then at the same time, I was approached by another networking organization that's like, hey, come network with us. I'm like, awesome. And so at the time in 2020, I was networking with this company called the Happy Neighborhood Project in 2020. And it grew so much over the pandemic. It grew like by leaps and bounds. And they're like, Nick, you have kind of a fun personality. I'm like, okay, well, they appreciate that. They're like, you should host some meetings. And I'm like, I don't know. They're like, then they looked at me like really close and like nodded their head up and down. They're like, you should host meetings. Like, okay, fine, let's go.
I believe that's being voluntold.
But yes, it was. It very much was. It very much was. Yeah. And so I networked with that organization up until the beginning of this year, actually. And it was crazy the amount of stuff that you're exposed to when you network and just let yourself out there and you connect with everybody in the world and you worry about zero geographic restriction and you just worry about those connections and focus on making good intentional connections and good intentional follow-ups. And you do the work of networking, which is like super, super important. You meet some incredibly fascinating people from like all over the world, craziest like professions you could ever imagine. Like okay, like to give you an example, like some just totally like professions I would have never like thought existed, honestly. Somebody was like, yes, I'm a pet psychic. And I'm like, oh, for real? She's like, I can tell you exactly what your pet's thinking right now. And I'm like, really? She's like, I don't even have to see your pet. And I'm like, who in the world is this Yahoo? Like, what's going on here? You know? She's like, yeah, your pet doesn't even have to be alive. And I'm like, is she just making up stuff and be like, what is this? You know? And like, and I've seen that to where, but then I've seen like other companies, large organizations, like all the things, right? And the coolest part about it is it's opened up my mind so much on A, what's possible, and two, it makes the world a really, really small place, you know?
Yeah.
And by the time I ended up finishing with that, with the network organization I was previously speaking about, I was, responsible with me and two other people responsible for coordinating events and making sure they were well attended over 100 countries, which is like not necessarily the smallest thing. And
No,
so that
that's
was,
a big feat.
yeah, it was my first time working with every time zone in the world. So that was pretty cool. Um, and it was just like, well, I was like, dude, India, like seriously, guys, really? If anybody from India is listening, like you guys have so many time zones, honestly.
And the
Like,
halftime zone.
yeah.
What
I
is
mean,
up
like,
with that?
like high five for doing your own thing, man. But like, dude. Anyway, I digress. So anyway, so
It
that
makes
was
it so challenging. So I know anyone who's worked in India is going, uh-huh.
yeah, right, yeah. Oh my gosh. So then after I was doing that one, I kind of stopped in that one at the beginning of the year. And it's crazy because it's like when you've been networking so much, it's like where do you go? Like what do you do? You know what I mean? Um and so like for example, like opportunities that arose while I was networking is luckily I was able to um speak on the stage twice at the University of Michigan for the leadership experience tour. And I was on the cover of a magazine and I was on TV and all kinds of stuff. Like that wouldn't have been
Amazing.
possible had I not been networking. Like I wouldn't have even known who these people are had I not been networking. And so networking is obviously super important. And I know I wanted to continue it when that opportunity closed at the beginning of this year. So I'm like, snot, how am I going to do this? Right. So being so globally connected so intensely over 4 years has luckily afforded me friends in many, many countries. And so a lot of those people were messaging me and they're like, hey, what are you going to do? Are you going to start your own group? What are you going to do? I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then I was talking to one of my mates in Australia and he was saying the same thing. And I was like, that's interesting. And then we were talking back and forth. We're like, hey, well, maybe we could start a group. I don't know. I mean, it's not like we don't know how to do this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You've got a, wee bit of experience.
Right. And I was like, well, we probably could. And he's like, hey, you think we could get our mate in Canada to like sign on to this? And I'm like, yeah, probably. I think so. And then we talked to him and he's like, yeah, I've been getting messages all the time too. And so it turns out we formed this organization called Synergy, but we misspelled it. It's S-I-N Ergy, right? Um, and so reason why is because the guy in Canada, his name's Sid Singh, and then the guy in Australia, his name's Ian Kingwell, and then my name is Nick Davis, which is fun. So right now it's only 3 countries big, but it's going to grow on you for sure,
So just to wrap that up, that's SIN for the first letters of each of your names.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Just, just to keep up, that was a lot of information.
Yeah.
I know. I loved hearing about how Synergy came to be when you and I talked the other day before the podcast. So it's definitely on my agenda to check out. And then very soon, now that the kids are back at school, I've got so much more available time in my schedule to like get stuff done. It's lovely.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a fun part about it is they put the guy with bananas on his background in charge of in charge of fun things, which is like I'm so on board with. So we actually spin the bottle during the call. It's lots of fun. We have like a little virtual bottle and stuff. It's good times.
I mean,
And
people need to show up just to see what that is and figure that out. We shouldn't tell anybody. They need to
oh yeah,
kind of figure it out.
Mum's the word on that one for sure.
I mean, that sounds intriguing. That's worth spending, an hour of time to figure that out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, and I love networking with intentional people too, because, like you, I found that I really love people. There's so many incredible people with incredible stories. And I wasn't in networking before the same way when I was in industry, when I was a W-2. Like you'd go to kind of conferences and you'd kind of
Mhm.
like chit chat people, but it's different. You're not looking for like, hey, Nick, what's going on in your business right now? How can I help you? And that's just such a different energy. And it's really nice to be in that place where I'm focused about the other person and, you know, how can I help them? How can I make them better? And you actually have to be really curious. You have to actually listen. Those are really good traits
Thank you.
to grow and expand and focus on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's crazy because some people are like, they're like virtual networking, like, why do you do virtual networking? It's not the same as in-person networking. And now that I have finally joined an in-person networking group that's actually pretty legit, it's one of my BNI chapters. It's really, really fun, but virtual is it's just a different world
Yeah.
entirely. They're like, can you still convey emotion? Can you still convey that connection? Can you still XYZ? And the answer is absolutely yes, absolutely. You know? You've just got more things to do and more things to work with, you know? It sounds
Yep.
like this, but it's really more because then you're focusing more on body language and like movement and facial features and like those things and tonality even more. So and they're all things as business owners we need to focus on anyway. So it's just
Absolutely.
yeah,
I
so it's just like you
I
were saying, it's stuff we need to get better at, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where I was going. You just get better and better at it. But going back to how I started this episode out with health insurance, it's something, especially as a W-2 employee, my husband was W-2 employee, and we only ever looked at our two in health insurances. When open enrollment came about, it was like he got his big, binder folder full of information. I got mine. We sat them side by side and was like, all right, which one's gonna be the best? I don't know. This kind of feels like, you know,
Yeah,
throw a dart, right?
right,
One of them,
right.
just pick one. We had a 50-50 shot. And when we were having the conversation of coming into me becoming an entrepreneur and working for myself, that was definitely a question of, okay, how is health insurance going to work? Yes, we can do it through yours, or is there other options? Like, I don't even know how this works outside of
Mhm.
that. Why is it so complicated?
Man, I am telling you what, that's a different conversation, different day, I do believe, honestly. Um, and put your tinfoil hats on for that one too, you know. Um, but yeah, it's definitely some interesting stuff when you look at things like that, and it's actually super convenient you bring that up on today specifically because it's you know like calendar wise speaking where we're starting that season for open enrollment right now, and companies are in the middle of the bigger companies and so on and so forth. And the interesting part is like it's and so it basically most Americans, roughly 86% of Americans work for somebody else as a W-2 or XYZ, right? And so
Mhm.
what is health insurance to the vast majority of America? It's that pamphlet you get handed every year, or that booklet or that binder you get handed every year with all those abbreviations in it. And you're like, what is this even about? Like, seriously, I see a bunch of percentages. I see the word deductible about a million times, so that probably is decently important. And you're like, well, what is this? What is this company? What is this company? I don't even know. Blah, 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 and then they're like, what's POS mean? What's all these things mean? And it's like, and so it's very interesting when you take that stuff on, and
What
then
does
when you
POS mean? Because I can think of like several acronyms that are probably not what that means.
so in my okay, so POS, okay, so it's okay, so it's my opinion, of course, right? But POS isn't, it's not what you think it means, but it kind of works how you think it means, if that makes sense, right?
Okay.
So what I mean by that is like, so essentially it's how it stands for point of service, right? And it's almost like the HMO organizations were like, sweet, okay, we know our stuff only works in state. And yes, that sucks. However, how can we be PPOs without being a PPO and still manage all of the care situations and everything like that going on? Like, how can we do that, right?
Hmm.
And then some guy was like, it's if you've seen Anchorman, it's like Brick raising his hand, like I tried and I it's like somebody raises their hand, they're like, oh, just tell them we can go out. It's like, and so basically it's
I just think of brick and I love land.
Same. Yeah. It's like, he's like, I stabbed somebody with a trident. It's like, yeah, you might not want to talk about that, dude. You know? Oh, okay.
He's the best character.
So much
Oh my
fun.
gosh. So much we digress.
100%. Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, oh
What
my gosh.
idea was this for us to talk? We know that we're gonna squirrel all over the place.
Right? Oh my gosh, man. But
Okay,
yeah,
audience, come on, come back, stay with us. Okay.
they're like, oh, these yahoos, what are these guys talking about? But basically, it's like the HMO organizations are like, all right, cool. Let's make friends with one hospital, maybe two tops. Let's make friends with one provider, maybe two tops, that have locations that are not in the state that the program is located in, right? And then we're going to call those our point of service locations that are outside of state, right? And so the way technically it's, closer to a PPO plan because it does work outside of the state you live in. However, it only works at specific locations outside of the state you live in. So, for example, you could be on a vacation in Tennessee, for example. You're like, awesome, I need to go see my doctor. So then you look up your POS situation and you're like, awesome, the next okay, cool, awesome, great, I can go see somebody that's in a different state. Wonderful. Where's that other state at? Oh, it's not. That's like 600 miles from me. Okay, well, and then you can either you there?
I'm there.
That was fantastic. Awesome.
Yes, I'm gonna have to edit this video.
I am
Awesome.
so sorry about that. Yeah. I was like, wow, she's like held the same position for a hot minute, dude. She's pretty good at this.
Well, here's the thing. I don't know if it's gonna pick up whatever you're saying. So I'm like, I'm just gonna stay quiet and hopefully he comes back and we just keep going. But anyway, that's okay.
What's the last thing you heard? Did my audio drop out or no?
I couldn't hear you, but that doesn't
Okay.
mean that it wasn't still picking it up from your end because the audio is in two separate files.
Okay.
Is how I do it. So your audio might still be there, but just for video sake, continuity.
POS
Last
definition?
thing I heard is, oh snot, it's 600 miles away.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, then you missed like a sentence. So that's good.
Okay. So you must have been waiting for me for a second.
I was. I was like, hello? And you were like,
Tap, tap. Is anyone there?
it was awesome.
Maybe I'll just keep this in just because.
I mean, just why not? You know what I mean?
Why not? Just save me some time.
Oh man,
This
is the
real
perils
life.
of virtual networking, right? Oh my gosh.
This is just real life.
I mean, it's a fun game I play usually with virtual networking. Sometimes, like thinking or buffering. It's a good one. It's my favorite game to play. Where it's where somebody's just holds a face, and I'm like, thinking or buffering. I don't know which one it is. And then like see if they move or not. And it's like a Western standoff. It's doves flying. Good times.
Yeah, that's funny.
All right. So anyway.
Anyway.
Yeah. So that provider could be maybe 600 miles away, and you're like, oh, snot, that's some stuff, And so, I mean, so you can either you have the option to go like 600 miles away, or it just not be covered, right? And so that's POS plans in a nutshell, right? So sometimes they're a good fit, right? So I was working with one individual. They were like, hey, look, I work in this city and this city that's in a different state, right? And I'm like, okay, for example, like Dallas, I work in Dallas and I work in Oklahoma City, for example. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, and I have a POS plan. And I'm like, okay, well, PPO plan is not a bad idea because it gives you the freedom to go anywhere you want, any doctor you want, any hospital you want, and you're in charge of what's medically necessary, which is a huge deal. Or so the doctor is rather. And she's like, yeah, but I mean, I'm literally only these two spots, and this is the only two spots my insurance actually works. And so because I don't leave these areas like ever, for her instance, it was a good fit, right? For other people's instance, they'd come to me in their group plans in their company. And I look at their plans. They're like, yeah, man, yeah, it works in multiple states. I'm like, that's so cool. So then I read the little bitty fine print on the tippity tip top that everybody skips over. And I'm like, oh, it says POS. And they're like, oh, what does that mean? Hopefully not what I think it means. And I'm like, pretty close.
Yeah, because there's a couple different meanings for it, that's for sure.
Exactly. I mean, I just reviewed a plan this morning for an enormous organization a buddy of mine's a part of. And he was like, yeah, man, I was looking at this plan and this plan. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And I was like, let's take a look. So I looked at the first plan he showed me, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is PPO, so that's good. Okay, let's take a look at the second plan. And he's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, this one works everywhere too. And I'm like, oh, does it? And he's like, yeah, that's what they told me. They told me it works everywhere. And I'm like, huh, interesting. interesting. And they're looking, so a lot of these POS plans employers put on because they're, they could be a lot lower cost for them to offer, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of those things you got to have your wits about you when you're looking at these things, which is a huge deal. Otherwise, you'll get the short end of the stick real quick,
Well, and I find it interesting because, as the listeners and viewers have come to understand at this point, you and I are squirrels. We bang, boop, 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 we're all over the place.
Yeah.
But it's really detail oriented to kind of go through some of those things. So it doesn't always seem like maybe that's a natural fit for you. So how
Mhm.
did you come into doing health insurance?
Well, kind of fun, right? So, the quick answer is it was out of necessity, and there were no PPO plans in Texas, and I didn't know what to do for my girls. I've got triplets, 3 little girls, and it's just me and my girls. And so I was like, snot, how do I get coverage for my kids that actually works? Because I know PPO is a big deal. I did HMO one time for fun. I did HMO. Oh my gosh, freaking engineers! If you guys know any engineers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like sometimes it's like talking to, hey, there you go. Yeah.
Engineer.
Guilty. Yeah, exactly. Right. Sometimes it's like, when you're not talking to individuals like us, it's like talking to a brick wall sometimes, right? And I'm like, what's an HMO? And they're like, oh, I'm not qualified to answer that. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, what do you have? Well, I mean, you don't know what that means. You don't know. And I'm like, you can just admit you don't know something. And they're like, no,
Okay.
yeah, I just doing it. And so it was that thing. So I got an HMO for fun one year. It was just a terrible idea. Nothing was a no work. Everything was really, really expensive for me, for my situation. So I knew it was a bad fit. But I knew in Texas there was no PPO in the marketplace, and I didn't know why. And so at the time, I was like, man, I don't know what to do, because here I am. I got my COBRA documents in, which is the Continuous Omnibus Reconciliation Act. And so essentially that's when you leave an employer, your employer has up to 30 days to get that packet to you after you leave. And it's a continuation of your benefits from when you were employed with that organization. However, because you no longer matter to them, you're not a barcode anymore, you're on the system. So they will take the whole 30 days, 9 times out of 10. And when they send that to you, it's a huge deal, because it's what they were paying for you, plus what you were paying for you, plus a minimum 2% stitching fee. And that's going to be your new premium. And it only lasts 18 months, right? And so it's not a permanent solution. And so I got that for me and the girls, and I was like, holy Moses, this is like a lot, like
So
a lot,
expensive.
And that sticker shock hit, and I was like, I don't know what's going on here. And so at the time, I went to like every O in Google, and I couldn't find any reputable information at the time. And because it's just opinions, and I was like, how can I base stuff off opinions? Like, what is this? You know what I mean? And so, coming from the
Hold on,
engineer.
I just got what you said with every O in Google. That
there's
just
a lot
clicked.
of them.
There's
Yeah,
a
there's a
lot of
lot.
them. Yeah, that's why I was reading every O in Google. There's two, but
Oh yeah.
gotcha. I'm with you.
Yeah. No, you're good. And so I was thinking to myself, I'm like, well, I mean, coming from the world of engineering, I'm used to being inundated with unholy amounts of information anyway. So what's another couple tests for fun, right? So I was like, if I was doing this for a living, how would I do that? And so I looked, I did all my testing and so on and so forth for everything I could possibly imagine health insurance wise. And then that led to, getting fingerprinted by the FBI and regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. And then brokers, and it was so basically on that side of the fence, when I finished that stuff before the fingerprinting, when I finished that stuff, I was like, sweet, well, now I know why there's no PPO plans in Texas. That doesn't necessarily help me out tremendously. So what am I going to do with my life? Right.
Yeah.
And because at the time I was just like, beans, I'm unemployed. Right. And I've got to worry about my kids. I had at the time I was engaged, no longer, but at the time I was engaged. So I had that. It was just a lot, like everybody's
A
got
lot
things to
happening.
work through. And so I was like, man, how am I going to figure this out? So what am I going to do with my life? Right. And so I was like, all right, cool. So like any good engineer would, I made a spreadsheet to solve all the problems in the world. And
I firmly believe that Excel does do that.
it's a real thing. It really is.
Like, hold on, let me create a spreadsheet and then I'll have an answer.
Literally, hold on. What my formula according to, gosh, man, F and beans. I'm telling you what. So, so I basically made an Ishikawa diagram, so a fishbone diagram, and my fishbone diagram was titled "What Makes Nick Happy?" Because I was like, well, snot, if I'm going to reinvent myself, may as well, be something that makes me happy, right? Because I had 650 plus resumes, applications, everything out there at the time. Nothing was hitting. Everybody was like, dude, you have too much experience and you're too expensive, or you're too this, or you're too that. I'm like, I'm like, this really, really is, it sounds cool, but it does not help the Nick situation here.
Yeah.
And so went back to my fishbone diagram. I'm like, I'm going to put down everything on here and do a full root cause analysis, right? Which is like the root cause of what they all have in common, right? And so I'm like, all right, cool. Well, all right. So I started with, kind of what I did. Really. So basically, I've done a lot of different things, right? So when I was, when I was very, very young, I was a fashion consultant for high-end women's fashion. Lots of fun. I've got stories for days on that. Oh my gosh, it's awesome. Like literally, like these so these here I am, like 19, the skinny like 19-year-old punk rock kid with like, foot and a half, like almost 1 foot Liberty spikes in multiple colors everywhere. You know what I mean?
You're gonna have
And
to send a picture because I'm gonna have to like insert this.
oh my gosh, man, I'm telling you what. And these ladies with like literally these gaggles of, I guess now you would probably call them cougars, but I didn't know that at the time, right? I was like, these ladies are very friendly. Not really thinking anything of it. Like, thank you, ADHD and autism. I'm just like, hey, it's cool. Everybody's nice, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
no, but hey, I figured that out later in life, right? So, here I'm like doing my thing, and they're like, these ladies come in, they're like, okay, so you got to listen to everything Nick says because he will help you get a man an Aspen, okay? And I'm like, cool. All right, let's go. And it was a lot of that going on. It was fantastic. It was so much fun. So that was a thing, right? And then also during the winter season, I would also be fitting ski boots and so on and so forth. I've been practicing biomechanics for like 26 years, and that's like aligning skeletal structures, making sure you're preventing pronation, so on and so forth. But I also hand make inserts like that as well, which is basically the same thing that Podorthus does, even though I didn't know that existed at the time. And so that's really, really cool. So I was doing all of that. And then that was mainly during the winter. And then during the summer, I was running inline skate shops, skateboard shops, and just kind of doing it that way, right? For a while. And then taking my biomechanics stuff in there and making all of that work. It's kind of like this fun little, clay mold situation, right? And then after that, I graduated college and went to uni. And then by the time I got out of that,
You've been hanging out with way too many Australians and Canadians.
oh, yeah,
Uni.
fair enough. Yeah.
Did you have to go to hospital?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah, I think they've adopted me at this point, honestly. Um,
It's
so I
amazing.
got into there, and then I went to go work for Enterprise Rent a Car for a little bit, and broke a lot of their records and stuff like that, doing managing locations and da 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 da. Fantastic management training. And then I was dating at the time. I was dating the girl, which is now my ex-wife, and she was a ballet instructor. And so I was like, well, hey, our schedules are slightly different. They're like literally opposing from each other. And at the time, a bicycle shop called me, and they were like, hey, Nick, we really need your help. I was in the action sports industry for like 18 plus years, like doing 20, 30-foot jumps on pedal bikes, skateboards, skates, you name it. It was all the things, right? I'm like the poster child for you probably should have worn pads. Um, and like
Child for do not try this at home.
literally, yeah, exactly, right, exactly. And so they called me back and they're like, hey, I tell you what, we'll make you a deal. You can, because I was like, dude, I got an office and a car, man. I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to do as an American, right? I don't know. And they're like, yeah, man, well, if you want, you get the same amount of money and you can wear shorts and a t-shirt every day and talk about bikes and mess around and get one all expense paid trip a year to go test new bikes the next year on a mountain. And I'm like, twist my arm a little. Okay, cool,
Yeah.
we're good. Yeah, thank you. So that was fun. But before I did that, mind you, while I was doing all of this stuff when I was younger, when I was like 19, doing the stuff in the winter and the stuff in the summer, that wasn't enough for me. And so during that time, I also became an internationally represented dancer as well. So I've danced with people from every continent on the planet, with the exception of Antarctica, mind you. So if you know anybody in
Oh,
Antarctica, let me know.
there's no people that like permanently live there. So would that even
Yeah,
count?
yeah, it could be a thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that was really fun. I did Lindy Hop, invited to the Olympics and all different kinds of things. It was super, super, super fun.
Okay, so just breakdancing and the Olympics. Quick take. What are your thoughts?
I never in a million years thought I would see somebody impersonate a kangaroo on live TV, honestly,
The Olympics. Being serious. I mean,
literally,
serious as possible.
literally. Oh my gosh, yes. But But yeah, so during that time I was doing the Lindy Hop swing dancing stuff. That was a blast. It was really, really fun. And then I was such a dumb kid sometimes, I was like, because I had like, it was one of those situations where I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Not really good, but I'm like, yeah, I'm good.
Mm.
And so then after I was doing the swing dancing stuff, I thought I was growing up too fast, which I literally had a solid career in dance. Had I stayed in dance, I would have been like an international teacher right now, running studios and blah 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 blah. But like,
Life,
young Nick doesn't have foresight, right?
yeah,
And so I
life is
left
life
and I
thing.
became a professional musician, which is fun. And so I did, gigs, tours, shows, albums, record labels, whole 9 yards. That was lots and lots and lots of fun too. And then at the
I love
time,
how like if you were to have like a book on your life, like some of these things make sense as like chapters, and some are like completely different books. And then you get to be a health insurance agent with Reclaim Your Premium. That's in like a different library.
literally, yeah, it was so weird. Like, and it's and what it comes down to is I was after I was doing all those things, and then the bike shop, ran a bike shop for a long time, was master fitter for like 15 years. So like, somebody bringing me a bike frame, I can size it down to the skeletal structure within like a millimeter, which is pretty cool. Um, I only did that for like 7 or 10,000 people, so it wasn't that big of a deal here in Houston, but like that was fun. And then somebody recruited me to go work in engineering because he was like, "Hey, dude, you got a really cool grip of applied physics. Like, why not?" Right? I was
Yeah.
like, "Sure." He's like, "Would you like to get paid to break things for a living?" And I was like, "Who would not? Seriously? Is that an honest question?" And so did that. Worked in a huge lab, and in about 5.5 years, I became the subject matter expert for the Western Hemisphere of the planet for a couple different things, which is really, really cool.
Which
And
it makes it sound like you're 70 years old if we were to add up all of these times.
right,
And you're not.
100%, yeah.
I mean, Nick, it's just there's so much, like I feel like we need another episode just to break down this because we've coming up to the end of time and
My gosh.
there's still so much.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
It's
But
okay. No, it's
yeah.
great. It's absolutely great. And I'm glad there's so like an endless supply of stories. I mean, it could even just be like an episode on every industry that you've been in and have like a deep dive
Probably.
into it.
Oh my
But this
gosh.
will just be episode one of a like 10-part series.
There you go. There you go. Right. Oh my gosh, man. Oh my gosh. Your viewers are like, "What do you just get to the point?" Um,
But
oh my
let's
gosh.
bring it back to healthcare really
Yes.
quick before we
Yeah, yeah,
wrap
yeah,
up
please. Yeah, huh.
and health insurance. And, you know, obviously you've had so much experience. As a last question, what has kept you in health insurance this long? And, what is it that you love about it?
What has kept me in health insurance is I never in a million years, never in a million bajillion years thought this was something that could actually legitimately change people's lives and truly, truly help the baseline in America, right? Because 14% of Americans, they don't get health insurance through an employer or because they're entrepreneurs or solopreneurs or whatever. And this is a huge deal for them. And at first, before I was doing what I'm doing, I just thought it was a box to check off, right? Just like everybody
Mhm.
else does.
Yeah.
And now I realize that having the right plan can make or break your situation. And there's so much stuff out there, and it gets really confusing that you might think you're good and like, oh, dude, I've done this for 15 years or 20 years or what, how to do it, I'm fine, right? But in the end, we all don't know what we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And there's at the advisor level where I'm at, I have the ability to see most everything that's available, just about everything that's available in any state that I'm licensed in. And so, which is a whole lot more than regular people can see. And it ends up working out a lot for different people. Like certain people are like, look, my employer covers me 100%. I'm like, that's fantastic. They're like, but it's like $900 to add my one kid. Like, what is this about? And I'm like, yeah. Do you have a spouse? And they're like, yeah. Well, they're on their plan. And I was like, well, how much is like, what are they doing for their? Like, oh, their plan's like $500 a month, but it's like it is what it is. I'm like, well, how have you thought about this? Maybe putting your spouse and your child on a different plan to larger network, better coverage, da, 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 da. But you could do that. And because of the way the world works now, and the landscape of the United States has changed drastically over the past 10 years, we all would agree on that. It's more efficient and more times than not to have multiple people on different plans within a household because it actually works out. But the way that you figure that stuff out is you meet with a person like me, and it's really cool to be able to, help the bottom line of America, so to speak. And it sounds like super like cheesy to say that, but it's the truth,
Yeah.
There's been, people that have called me for every certain reason. And like I was able, like one of my clients was like, I was able to make my dream come true because I had the right insurance. And I'm like, you're making that up. And he's like, no. Like, I'm literally for real. And I'm like, how's that even a thing? So like stuff like that. So that's to answer your question, like the longest way possible. That was basically it.
So for the listeners that are maybe thinking of going into work for themselves and they're like, oh shoot, I didn't even think about healthcare and how that's all going to work. Are those kind of the clients you work with, or who is your ideal client? Who do you love to work with?
Yeah, my bread and butter client are people who are, think they can retire, but they're like their advisors told them they can retire, but they're not 65 yet. And they're like, I don't really know if I want to retire because I don't want to like leave my cool benefits, but I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And if I
Sure.
leave it, I don't think I'll have the option to have cool PPO benefits. So those people. The other bread and butter client is families and individuals. It's very, very often that one spouse is W-2 and the other spouse sowed their creative roots during the pandemic or whatever have you. And spouse A is like, sweet, I'll carry the benefits while you be creative and do your thing. And then spouse A is like, wait a tick, hold on, that actually works for you? Sweet, I want to come work for you too. It's so much fun. Let's do that. And when they do that, they're like, oh snot, what do I do for health insurance?
Yeah.
And so that's a huge client for me. And then obviously individuals as well. They're like, I didn't know I could, get an individual plan. And I'm like, you totally can get an individual plan. And the thing is it's not more expensive than what you'd find in the marketplace either. It's actually usually a lot lower than that, which is pretty cool.
That's really cool. And how can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. So several ways. The easiest way is reclaimyourpremium.com. www.reclaimyourpremium.com. Right on there, that goes directly to my calendar. You can talk to me directly, right? Another way, you can Google 3 words. If you remember 3 words from this entire conversation, reclaim your premium. Those 3 words, I'm like almost the whole full page of Google. You can find so much stuff. My girls are like, Dad, you're famous. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you're everywhere. I Google your name and you're on the internet. I'm like, oh, cool. Thanks. I got my cool little cheerleaders. So that works. And then from there, you can find my LinkedIn profile, which has my phone number on it and all different kinds of things.
Perfect. Well, I will make sure I have all of that linked in the show notes as well to make it super duper easy for everybody. But this has been so great. Thank you so much for sharing about networking and I don't even know what to call your history.
Right?
It's like a blender of like someone was like, here's a job possibility. I'll just throw them all up and
basically. They're like, hey, it's a career casserole. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Career casserole. I love that. But it's important because, so many times I think people get stuck in their head of I am this, and they don't ever explore what else they could be. So thank you for illustrating that for everyone so clearly, because there's always more. You're always more than the box we put ourselves in.
1000% correct. I couldn't even have said it better.
Well, but, I'll just hang up my podcasting hat and let you take over. Ooh, you could be a guest podcast host.
Okay, I'm down.
That could be fun.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, we digress. Surprise, surprise.
For sure.
To the audience, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you listening. If you have not liked yet, please make sure that you like it, subscribe it, share it with your friends. If there is a person, industry, profession that you are interested in, please make sure to share that with me, and I will find the most amazing guest to bring to you, because that that's what I do. Until next time, everyone, take care.